All right, let's dive into this hurricane prep stuff. You've been looking into making homes safer for hurricane season, and wow, it's a lot more intense than I thought. Honestly, I always figured it was mostly just about boarding up windows,
Not
right?
even close.
Yeah.
It's way more involved. And honestly, the really interesting thing is that hurricanes themselves are changing. So how we prepare has to change too. You know,
Oh.
it's got to adapt.
Yeah, that's what really caught my attention in this article. Can you build a hurricane-proof house? They kept saying how hurricanes are evolving, so it's not just that they're getting stronger. Like, what's actually changing about that?
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about wind speed.
Mm.
It's about how they intensify and how they behave. Like take Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah.
They intensified so rapidly.
Right.
Went from like a normal day to a Category 5 incredibly quickly.
What, like almost overnight?
Yeah. And then we've got hurricanes, like Hurricane Harvey, which just kind of stalled out over Houston and dumped insane amounts of rain. I mean, unbelievable amounts. And that kind of slow-moving, rain-heavy hurricane, we're
Yeah.
seeing those more and more now.
So it's not just wind speed anymore. It's like a whole different ball game.
That's it. It's this combination of factors now, like the wind pressure we're seeing now.
Hmm?
It doesn't just rip off your roof. It weakens every connection in your house, like a domino effect.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the rain. It's not just rain coming down. It's wind-driven rain. So it's almost like it's coming at you sideways with so much force, it ends up in places you'd never expect.
Like your attic.
Okay, wind-driven rain in the attic. That's a new one I did not know about. And it's all connected. Like, say, debris shatters a window. Now you've got wind getting inside the house. And it's like the whole house becomes as a balloon. It's ready to burst.
Oh, wow.
It's this crazy chain reaction.
Okay, so with all of that, this whole hurricane-proof house idea, it's kind of sounding too good to be true now.
Yeah, you're right. There's no such thing as a completely hurricane-proof house. The term they use now is hurricane-resistant because at the end of the day, it's about minimizing the damage. We can't really beat Mother Nature.
Makes sense. We
Yeah.
can't control the weather.
Right. So if we can't make a house invincible, what are the big things we should focus on to make our homes more resistant, especially with these new hurricane behaviors we're seeing?
So I think it's helpful to think about two scenarios. Building a new home from scratch versus trying to reinforce an existing one. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because obviously if you're starting from nothing, you have way more options.
Exactly. So let's say you're building a new home in a hurricane-prone area. Number one thing, build above the FEMA floodplain.
The floodplain. Okay, that makes sense. But how do I even know where that is? Like, where do I find that out?
That's where those flood maps come in. Remember you were asking about those. They're super important for that. It's like they tell you if your property's in a high-risk zone for flooding or even just in a floodplain at all.
So are flood maps like one size fits all? Or do
Yeah.
they vary a lot depending on where you live?
No, they're actually really detailed and specific to each location. And the cool thing is FEMA updates them regularly, like they have to, because floodplains can change, especially with climate change and all that.
Wow, so it's not like a one-time check. You really got to stay on top of it.
Exactly. Whether you're buying or selling or just figuring out your own risk, those maps are super important. But okay, back to building. So we said location is key. Sometimes that means elevating your main living space, putting it on the second story so it sits above potential flood levels.
Right, so basically building higher. What about the structure itself, though? Does it need to be like a concrete bunker to hold up against everything?
Not necessarily. It's more about how well the entire house is designed to withstand wind loads.
Wind loads. Okay, can you break that down for me a bit? What exactly are those?
Think about if you push on a wall with all your might. That force you're using, that's like wind load. Now imagine wind pushing with the force of like 1,000 people. That's what your house has to deal with in a hurricane.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of force.
Exactly. So it's less about having super thick concrete walls and more about how everything is connected from your roof all the way down to the foundation. Think about it like building a Lego tower versus like a house of cards. You know,
Yeah.
a well-designed structure, even with lighter materials, can be really strong.
Right. It's all about how it all fits together. That's cool. But let's be real. Not everyone is building a new hurricane-resistant home. So for the rest of us who already have homes, what are some things we can do to upgrade them and make them safer?
Oh, there's actually a lot you can do, even without doing a full renovation. Like one major one is reinforcing those gable ends, you know, the triangular parts of the wall under the roof.
Oh, right. I've seen those completely ripped off of houses after hurricanes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're super vulnerable. Upgrading your windows to impact-resistant ones, that's
Yeah.
a big one too. And honestly, never underestimate a hurricane-rated garage door.
Really?
You wouldn't believe how much damage a regular garage door can cause if it fails.
That's true. I always see those busted open in hurricane videos.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, what about the roof? Any tips for the roof?
absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're replacing your roof, make sure they use that peel and stick underlayment. It's like this extra layer of protection.
Yeah.
That helps keep water out, even if your shingles get ripped off.
It's like a secret backup plan for your roof.
Oh.
I like it. Okay, so these upgrades are really cool, but it seems like the main takeaway here is to be prepared. Like, you don't want to wait till the last minute when there's already a hurricane warning to start figuring all this out.
No way. You'll be in trouble if you do, especially with those fast intensifying hurricanes we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You might only have a small window to get ready. So yeah, knowing your risk and having a plan, that's super important.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm guessing every hurricane is different too, right? Like, there's no one-size-fits-all hurricane.
Yeah, you got it. They all have their own personality, I guess you could say.
Mm.
Different intensities, different paths, rainfall amounts. It's never exactly the same. So what works for one hurricane might not work for another.
So it's about being flexible and being willing to adapt.
Exactly. You got it. Stay informed. Pay attention to those forecasts. And be ready to change your plan if you need to. It's like trying to stay one step ahead of the storm.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It's a constant process. We've been focusing on how individuals can get prepared. But it makes you think, like, how can whole communities adapt to these changing hurricanes? It feels like it goes beyond just individual homes.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
It really is a shared responsibility. Building codes, how we plan our infrastructure, even our social support systems, they all play a role in making communities more resilient.
Right.
And we can't forget about affordability either. Not everyone has the means to make these upgrades or to rebuild after a disaster if something happens.
Yeah, that's the hard truth. It's a reality we have to face. It's going to take everyone working together, from homeowners to policymakers, to create a future where we can handle these storms, literally and figuratively.
Well said.
This has been really eye-opening. Way more than just boarding up the windows, that's for sure.
Definitely not. The more you know, the more prepared you can be.
Exactly. Well, thanks for walking me through all this. I feel a lot more informed and, yeah, a little more prepared for whatever Mother Nature decides to throw at us.
Anytime. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to hurricanes. Stay safe out there.
It's like giving your roof its own little suit of armor. I love it.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, and it seems like being prepared is key. You don't want to wait till the last minute when a hurricane's already bearing down on you to start thinking about all this, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Especially with how quickly these hurricanes can intensify now. You might only have a day or two to get ready. So knowing your risk and having a plan beforehand, that's crucial.
Absolutely. And I imagine each hurricane is unique too, right? There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Each one's got its own intensity, its own path, rain amounts. It's never the same.
Yeah.
So what works for one might not work for the next one.
So you got to be adaptable, ready to adjust.
Precisely. Keep an eye on those forecasts and be ready to change your game plan if needed. It's like a chess match with Mother Nature.
I like that analogy. We've been talking a lot about individual preparedness, but it makes you wonder how entire communities can adapt to these changing hurricanes. It feels like it goes way beyond just what we do with our own homes.
You're absolutely right. It's a shared responsibility. Building codes, infrastructure planning, even social support systems. They all play a part in making communities more resilient. And of course, we have to talk about affordability too. Not everyone can afford to make these upgrades or rebuild after a hurricane hits.
That's the harsh reality. It's going to take all of us working together, our homeowners, policymakers, everyone, to build a future where we can weather these storms, both literally and figuratively.
Very well said.
Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening. Way more to it than just boarding up windows, that's for sure.
For sure. And the more you know, the better prepared you'll be.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks so much for taking the time to break all this down with me. I feel a lot more informed.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot more prepared for whatever Mother Nature sends our way.
My pleasure. Always happy to help. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay safe out there.